ACM SIGGRAPH Policy Against Harassment. This live stream is moderated by ACM SIGGRAPH. We ask that all comments stay respectful of others and respect ACM's policy against harassment. This means to exercise consideration and respect in your speech and actions. Refrain from demeaning, discriminatory, or harassing behavior and speech, and be mindful of your fellow participants. Hello, SIGGRAPH Frontiers. My name is Courtney Sterrett, and I'm part of the SIGGRAPH 2021 Production Sessions Subcommittee. Our Production Sessions team and I are excited to have collaborated with the SIGGRAPH Frontiers program to bring you today's presentation on the democratization of visual effects. Before I hand things over to our moderator, Darin Grant, I want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about the amazing content that our team has worked on this past year at SIGGRAPH 2021. This year's program features 10 premiere sessions, ranging from feature animation, streaming, games, as well as AR/VR. Sessions feature industry-leading content from contributors such as Pixar, Disney, Sony Pictures Animation and Imageworks, Industrial Light and Magic, Marvel Studios, Double Negative, Weta Digital, Blizzard Entertainment, ShowCap Entertainment, Baobab Studios, and we've also added more time for attendees to engage with our panelists, as well as all sessions are accompanied by a 1-hour Q&A. We've also added some great value and added extras to the program overall. In addition to our core programming, we have worked to prepare 3 outstanding special sessions. In partnership with our friends at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science, attendees will be taken on a unique behind the scenes of the 93rd Oscars VFX Bake Off, featuring the filmmakers of the year's best visual effect films. Tune in Monday for Oscars VFX Bake Off. You also don't want to miss Tuesday's session, The Academy Beyond the Oscars, the other 364 days, which will provide a rare glimpse into the Academy's diverse year-round initiatives. We are also very excited to explore the history of visual effects with the premiere publication, which brought readers 41 years of outstanding stories and behind the scenes. You don't want to miss the fun and surprises in store at the celebration of Cinefex on Wednesday. And just because the conference is virtual, it didn't stop us from planning some fun events like the production sessions meet and greets and a fun live drawing session featuring Marvel Studios. There's plenty of time to register for the conference and get inspired by all this amazing content. We look forward to seeing you there. I'd now like to introduce you to Darin Grant, our SIGGRAPH 2022 Electronic Theater Chair and the moderator of today's panel.
Hi, thank you so much, Courtney. And thank you, SIGGRAPH Frontiers, for hosting this. My name is Darin Grant, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Animalogic. I'm located here in our Animalogic Vancouver studios today, but we're a global studio with offices in Vancouver, Los Angeles, and Sydney in New South Wales, Australia. Today's panel is called the Democratization of Visual Effects. And I want to start by introducing our panelists. So first up is, let's see if she's going to pop up here. First up is Genevieve Camilleri. There we are. Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Genevieve gets to be embarrassed on screen while I read her bio. Genevieve Camilleri is an Australian visual effects supervisor with over 12 years of industry experience. She has a Bachelor of Multimedia and Digital Arts, as well as a postgraduate diploma in film and television visual effects. Prior to completing the above education, Camilleri also studied a Bachelor of Science in Biotechnology, Arts, Media and Communication double degree. She's worked both locally in Australia as well as abroad at Allura, ILM, Method, Mr. X, and now at Film Design. She's worked on over 38 high-end feature films, including Love and Monsters, which we'll be talking about today, Doctor Strange, Star Wars, The Force Awakens, Mad Max Fury Road, and Captain America Civil War. In addition to the above experience, she's also spent several years working as a compositing mentor for CG Spectrum College of Digital Art and Animation, as well as being an academic seasonal staff member for Victoria University. In 2021, Camilleri was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Visual Effects for her work as a VFX supervisor on the feature film Love and Monsters. She currently resides in Australia in lockdown, working as a visual effects supervisor. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think we have a short clip from the trailer from Love and Monsters to play as an introduction.
Yeah.
You need to push play.
Don't move.
Let me see it.
Don't move, Amy.
Let me see it.
Okay. Ready?
Mm-hmm. I love it.
That's super sweet because it's terrible. Oh my God.
Where have you been, Joel?
Amy, I love you. I'm gonna come find you. The day of the monster uprising was the day I lost everyone. Only a small fraction of humanity survived and moved underground. I've been scanning for Amy the entire time. And now I finally found her.
Joel.
Hey.
Joel.
Amy, is that you?
Oh my God.
Hey. How far away is Amy's colony?
85 miles. It's an impossible journey. Everyone will try to kill you. Don't fight. Just run and hide.
Okay.
You really got me going. You got me so I don't know what I'm doing.
You all alone? Me too. You don't have to talk about it.
You got me now.
You want to come with me?
So I can't sleep at night.
Look at him! Is that a samurai sword?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
Listen to your instincts out here, man.
What if I have terrible instincts?
You'll die.
Super encouraging speech.
You made it all this way for a girl, huh? You ever hear the term fools errand?
No! Amy, I miss you so much. We have lost this war. We could still take our world back.
You're more of a survivor than I thought.
Oh, that was awesome. Oh, I feel like Tom Cruise.
That was awesome. And a reference to Tom Cruise is appropriate for a Deepfakes conversation coming up next. Next up, our next panelist is Ryan Laney. Ryan is a visual effects supervisor at TS Media, small shop founded to provide visual effects to documentaries and other journalistic endeavors. He's been using visual effects to support storytelling in movies and special interest projects since 1994 and has worked with outstanding teams at Mannix, Industrial Light and Magic, Digital Domain, and Sony Pictures Imageworks. He's now exploring the crossover between deep machine learning and visual effects at TS Media. Digital veils he produced for the documentary Welcome to Chechnya earned the film a Visual Effects Society nomination for supporting visual effects and a spot on the Oscars VFX shortlist, the first documentary to make either list. Ryan develops workflows with a budget-conscious mindset. He has built tools and supported teams across a full gamut of project scales, including for cloud and water effects in The Aviator, Goo in Spider-Man 3, house destruction and space and planet effects for Zathura, energy systems for Green Lantern, robots and G-Force, and a custom cloud renderer for Dalgo. And he didn't mention The Day After Tomorrow where we worked together, but I won't hold that against him. A recent focus on machine learning techniques has led to working with human rights groups and efforts to make identity protecting tools available to documentary filmmakers. Now, Ryan, I think you have a short clip prepared to share with us now.
Welcome to Chechnya is a documentary which chronicles the persecution of LGBTQ youth in the Russian state of Chechnya and the efforts of organizations helping those individuals seek asylum. To protect the identities of the individuals and the activists who are helping them, we developed a high-fidelity digital veil and a process we call automated face replacement. This is a workflow we use to track, extract, machine learn, and then replace faces. This unique process offers the first major advancement in identity protection in decades and a sea change in the way witness testimony can be presented. For the first time ever, directors can present intimate moments in highly dynamic scenes without unnatural barriers like face fogging, blurry ovals, or darkened silhouette shots. The veils allow a person's expressions and their underlying emotions to pass through, giving audiences unprecedented, direct access to understand and empathize with witnesses who normally could not be seen on camera. Viewers can fully study faces in the testimony and see complex emotions revealed through subtle microexpressions in powerful nonverbal moments.
Automated face replacement adds to the documentary filmmaker's toolbox in a way that elevates the human connection inherent in storytelling.
Really amazing, inspiring work. And last but not least, we have Jim Godoldik. Jim leads North American operations for Dimension, one of the world's most advanced volumetric 3D capture and virtual production studios. Inspired by the power of emerging technologies for creative storytelling, Jim has experiences as cinematographer, director, and VFX artist on projects for Epic Games, Intel, Google, GoPro, Red Bull, Nike, Adidas, Nat Geo, Hulu, and many more. He's honed his skills across media and entertainment, working in features, broadcast TV, music videos, documentaries, XR, and action sports films. In his role at Dimension, Jim works to advance the use of virtual production technologies for high-profile feature films and limited series, driving the use of this rapidly evolving practice to benefit all aspects of film production pipeline. And I think you have the show reel for Dimension to play here, right, Jim?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And thank you all once again for joining the panel. So this is a live stream. We're going to be taking live questions from the audience. So if you're watching us here now live, please go ahead and submit your questions, and we'll let some of them queue up and answer them. I'm going to start with a few questions that I've prepared for the panelists already, though. So as mentioned, the name of this panel is the Democratization of Visual Effects, because each of you in a different way has made VFX accessible to a more broader scope of filmmaker and content creator. What other opportunities beyond the work beyond that work that you've done do you think are now open for the industry? And I'll just open that up. Maybe we'll start with Genevieve.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an exciting time in visual effects at the moment. For me, I started out maybe, I was like 11 years ago in the industry now, and it's certainly changed and come a long way from when I started. And just having access to it sort of worldwide is quite amazing. But yeah, I mean, for me, like even just the technologies and everything has just really changed. I'm not really sure where to sort of focus on that one, but yeah, it's yeah.
Well, it's interesting because people talk about Love and Monsters as this success story, as a low budget feature film. It wasn't low budget. I mean, $30 million is a lot of money to anybody, but for the amount of work and the type of work and the fact that you got a VFX nomination for that's the part that's super impressive. And so I guess as you see those kind of things being able to happen, and I mean, I want to talk to Ryan about that in a second, like, documentary filmmaking having visual effects that make the list. What do you see? How do you see that changing our industry going forward?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like blockbuster films, it was a low budget, but in terms of like independent films and all that, it was obviously a big budget film. But like the way technology has advanced, it's sort of, and the planning beforehand, it sort of enabled us to sort of really reach quite a high quality work for the balance and the budget and the time sort of constraints that we had, and it sort of allowed us to then compete against your $100 million films, as opposed to something that was like less than half the budget.
Cool, great. Ryan, do you have comments about the work that you've done and how that's going to change the future of filmmaking?
Yeah, I think the from our perspective, there are sort of two angles that seem to be more empowering right now, which is one, obviously AI or deep machine learning, and the other is pipeline and sort of like knowledge about how to move things through show efficiently. So yeah, I think just like the more people that have knowledge of the process, the better, the more the process can evolve and become more efficient. So that's great. And then as AI becomes kind of like a general purpose tool, or machine learning becomes a general purpose tool, I think it's going to take another leap in computing as we can have the machines make more sort of intelligent-ish decisions about compositing and manufacturing models and all sorts of really interesting applications.
Cool. Great. And then Jim, may not be obvious from the show reel because the work that you guys do is stellar, but there's a lot of that work which is done with virtual production technologies, or in particular volumetric capture. Do you want to talk a little bit about, and that's something that you've been able to, I think you have multiple studios in multiple locations. There's a plethora of those coming up all over the world. Do you want to talk a little bit about that as it relates to democratization?
Yeah, I think the same way that Genevieve brought up, kind of when I was starting out, a lot of the tool sets weren't as accessible. Whether you went to film school or you went to, a particular track that focused on kind of CG and visual effects, Flame was this, inaccessible tool unless you were, coming up through the ranks and were assisting and, coming up as a junior before you got time on, comping through with Shake and kind of graduating up from like After Effects and a lot of the, kind of traditional way, whereas today, I think a lot of the artists that have been in the industry for a while have seen the evolution of these tool sets get faster and faster with, faster CPU, GPU, and just real-time technologies maturing. But I think the generations underneath us just kind of grew up with this. They're seeing advancements in a lot of these tool sets, whether it be accessible marketplaces to just, kit bash, things together to get ideas out for previs or tech viz. I think with virtual production workflows and real-time workflows, we're seeing this maturity of not only the software stack, but also the hardware stack. What you could do today remotely from your house with a pretty good, laptop or even a desktop. We're seeing individual artists, guys like Ian Hubert and people out there that are doing amazing work, just, one or two people. So, as these accessible tools come from all these different DCC, companies, and they're making a lot of these free, it lets people explore, what could be possible, to be able to tell new stories in different ways.
So I guess maybe I'll ask you to, like, looking a little bit into the future, you've talked about the accessibility of tools, is what you were just talking about, Jim, and then Ryan, making workflows more efficient, both through accessible pipelines and more pipeline ability, and then also any task that you can have a machine do instead of yourself makes it more efficient. There's that. And then Genevieve, you're talking about the collaboration and early involvement in planning. So if you combine all those together, if we were having this panel 5 years from now, like, what do you guys think that work looks like? How do you, is it $3 million low budget or high budget independent films, Genevieve? Is it using these techniques across all documentary film? Like, what do you guys think is going to come next?
I think it just from the big studio perspective is efficiency with optimizations within a very big scalable pipeline for whether you're a big visual effects house or the studios like Amazon, Netflix, Disney, kind of take your pick. You're going to be able to do a lot more optimizations and scale up teams faster from like the independent, even some of the stuff that Ryan's working on in the documentary field, is that individual storytellers are now going to have this palette of tool sets available to them, where if they want to go the route of self-distribution, they could probably put together a much smaller team and probably be able to hire some amazing artists and technologists, and maybe a team of less than 15 to be able to put through some of these amazing projects that are getting done on like the indie level and kind of budgetary constraints that are normally kept for large scale projects.
It's interesting. So I guess you're talking about, like, in a normal production, sometimes you have crews that have worked together in the past and things like that, but it's not like you're hiring a company per se for the production work. You're saying that maybe visual effects might become more along those lines of a journeyman thing, of people pulling a band together rather than hiring a particular post-production studio.
Well, yeah, I can't say that a lot of this stuff doesn't give you the feels of Lucasfilm in the early days of like how George and the teams at Lucas and ILM kind of started off. It has that feel of being nimble and kind of trying out different pipelines and trying out different tool sets. If you want to jump between Houdini or Unreal or Unity or Notch or Touch Designer, I think today we have a lot of different choices. Obviously, that doesn't bode well for having a real centralized pipeline to get an efficient work through. But the fact that you can pick and try out and audition these different packages that are out there, both hardware and software, it lets you have a more informed decision of like what would be the right way to handle kind of previs and VAD and then on-set execution. So that's what's really exciting, I think, even for the future, is that this stuff is going to get more and more refined. It's going to get more and more optimized. There maybe in the future there is a point that we're not having to bake lights anymore because everything is real time. It is real. That I think that promise that we've all been sitting on for our careers is like the real time rendering and the whole kind of promise of real time technologies was that maybe we can get home and see our families and friends and have a life outside of work.
All right. You just mentioned real-time technologies. Genevieve, I want to ask you, real-time technologies have come up quite a lot, especially on the front end of the pipeline, previs of virtual production, et cetera. How do you see real-time technologies changing the way we produce final footage?
Yeah, real-time technology definitely really excites me. I haven't had a great deal of experience sort of on the vendor side of using real time just yet, but it's something I'm definitely sort of looking into. And I think the whole prospect of potentially replacing blue screen and green screens with these real time backgrounds that give you the natural lighting and the movement that you need is definitely exciting. And it's something that gets you thinking about are the artists' skills gonna change? Is there less work they're gonna have to do? Do their traditional sort of like green screen, blue screen techniques? Are they going to change? Or is it going to, in a way, sometimes it might create even more work in that we have these backgrounds that we did shoot on set, but maybe sort of, down the track, they're kind of like, actually, you know what, this isn't quite the background that we want. But then maybe you sort of got that baked in there, and your lighting is kind of all set, and then you probably have more problems potentially as an artist. So then now have to change that background, but you don't have the blue screen or green screen there anymore. I mean, it's
doing digital roto work on digital backgrounds. That's
exactly, and then trying to change the lighting, on that. But I don't know. It's really exciting. I think for the most part, it's going to be a really good positive, and it'll certainly help sort of streamline a lot of work that might have been a little bit more tedious, sort of at the time now.
Well, you mentioned blue screen, so we've got to throw to Ryan here, the most brave. It's pretty brave to have a blue screen on a visual effects panel. You don't know what people are going to do to you. I guess I'll say this knowing the answer, but I'd say on a project like yours, where the technique was so inherent in how that movie was able to come about, there must have been a lot of conversations early on in pre-production and involving you as a part of that production process in making the movie. Is that the case, and how did that affect your work?
No, actually, we came in at the very, very end. They actually shot for a year and a half and posted an editorial for a year before we even met them. So we were really just responding to the need. They'd shot this film and had it all put together, and no real way to release it at that point because they couldn't show these people on films. And they were actually trying to do something like a Scanner Darkly, sort of rotoscope and stylized picture in between. And what that did is actually accentuated the characteristics of the subjects in the film. So they really didn't know what to do, and we were just lucky to have the opportunity to kind of get in there and try to solve it. And we spent a few months, probably 3 months, 2.5, 3 months, trying to figure out what are the parameters of this problem. And so yeah, that was quite a bit of catch up. And which, just to go back to your first intro statement, I didn't put Day After Tomorrow on there because I also came into the end of that project, and there was an immense amount of, there was a year of work on that one before I was even involved.
Yeah, well, you still contributed though, just like on Welcome to Chechnya. So amazing. It's kind of amazing that could happen with coming in at the tail end. I guess going back to that idea of democratization, how do you see that technology affecting the future? I mean, especially you said your company's now focused a lot on helping on journalistic efforts and helping documentarians. It's interesting. A recent documentary that came out was Roadrunner, the Anthony Bourdain documentary, where there was a use of machine learning in order to recreate Anthony Bourdain's voice. Thankfully, it's him reading something that he'd written, so it's very relevant, but it feels a little odd. It's a different type of use of machine learning in that production compared to what you were doing, which was I'll say altruistic to an extent. What are your thoughts on some of the ethical use of AI in documentary filmmaking, and how that might?
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion about how to implement this in a way that was, journalistically sound in a way. And we came up with this idea that consent was really important through the whole process. So the subjects in the film knew that they would be covered. They were actually shown the film before it was released and were able to actually sign off on their own unlikeness, I guess you could say. The face doubles that we shot, the data capture we shot, they were all understood the story that they were going to be involved in. They took some pride in this idea of being a human shield, like a virtual shield. And then we had a disclaimer at the beginning of the film, and we added this tell, which is a sort of soft edge that's visual language tied to the blurry oval. So we felt like we were really on, kind of in each one of these three areas. We were having an open conversation. And as far as the Bourdain documentary, they didn't ask, apparently, I don't know for sure, but sounds like they didn't ask the estate. They didn't tell the audience. So the question is, machine learning or not, if you hire a voice double and they read something and you're telling the audience that it's real, is that ethically sound? I don't think so in that particular case. I think it's sketchy in the sense of journalism. I understand that it's just 3 lines, but it is a slippery slope. So I think it's something to be careful about as accessibility makes tools available to more projects. It's just going to increase the demand. Yeah. So I don't think we're going to fundamentally have fewer films somehow. It's just going to be more films are going to have access to more tools. So as we go down this road where we're looking at more journalistic and documentary projects, that we need to be really careful how we use whatever the tools are. If it's, changing backgrounds or something like maybe that's not okay in a documentary.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like as there's more and more content, and as there's democratization, so that stuff can be generated by anybody. Some of those rules that maybe some of us, we've been in the industry a little long, that we kind of know and feel unwritten and not needing to be voiced should be. Genevieve, Jim, have you had any experience in working with AI or machine learning techniques in any of your work before? So we use it for noise reduction in our renders. I think that's probably ethically sound. But
no, I haven't had a great deal of experience, to be honest, at this point. But I think it's definitely something that will become a little bit more mainstream, I think, at a lot of studios as it sort of develops.
Yeah, and we have a smaller R&D team where we have been using some of the research and testing with some of the the libraries that are out there, with Deepfakes Lab and some of the other ones within research and development along the digital human pipeline and kind of avatar pipeline that we have. So, like you said, using AI, using different tools that are out there to, if you happen to be rendering certain things using AI for noise reduction, like you said, and using them kind of sparingly in terms of, how they are implemented into the pipeline. I think there's varying results. And I think, you're going to turn through a render, and sometimes something you get out of there, based off of the training method that you're using for this, is it doesn't always yield the best results, and you still have to go in there and fine tune it from an artist perspective. So I think we're still kind of, moving along and testing these out, but there's, a lot of different exciting papers and demos and libraries out there, for automating, roto and, being able to, use markerless mocap workflow methods too, where you don't have to put on a suit and you don't have to put on markers everywhere. So the excitement of using, machine learning and AI as a whole is kind of progressing. And I think it's like every new test we see, from these independent artists and people that are just experimenting, out there on YouTube and all the social medias are really cool to see, because I think it helps inspire us in the visual effects and kind of the, filmmaking and storytelling industry. It would be like, we should hire that artist because he or she is doing some amazing work by themselves.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's happened a number of times, but it's a good lead in. You mentioned YouTube and seeing people on YouTube videos. There've been a number of those YouTube video explainer things out there where they use deepfakes are used by amateurs in order to redo the full digital face replacements that you maybe have seen in a number of much larger budget films than Welcome to Chechnya. Do you guys think, and maybe start with Ryan, of course, do you think deepfakes is an enabler for broader digital face replacement tool sets or to work in lower budget films? Or do you think because you got away, you're trying to use that as a human shield and very clearly saying this is not the person, and so if it's not tracking perfectly or you have a little bit of a blur, that's all that was part of that was kind of implicit. Do you see it as being used more broadly?
Yeah, I think again, it's just another tool. So it's just another tool in our toolbox of visual effects, and I think we should be careful about how it's used in the world. Deep fakes are inherently non-consensual. They often, they cover somebody that's often didn't give their approval. They use often an actor who didn't give their approval, and sometimes they're used to fool the audience. So again, going back to that consent idea of having open dialogue with all three parties, I think that's something that has to be distinguished between a face replacement and a deep fake. And I think the term is really, it has this tie to pornography and revenge and celebrity porn. It's just it's not a great, like, calling something fake is not a great kind of start to a conversation about it. So we think that's part of the conversation is distinguishing good visual effects tools and uses from the negative aspects of to misuse of tools. And I think there's certainly some negative misuses of this tool. The fun things on YouTube, like the Tom Cruise thing you mentioned earlier, I think that guy is actually an actor who learned how to move like Tom Cruise and speak like Tom Cruise, and he kind of looks like Tom Cruise already. So, like, would it be okay for him to go down to Hollywood Boulevard and sign autographs or take photos with people for $1 a piece? Probably, because that's in our things that are okay. But if he were to go to a bank and try to pass himself off, that would not be okay. So I think we really need to look at the actions in these things and how they're used versus like what it was that was used to create the thing.
Yeah.
If that, I'm not sure if that totally answers the question.
No, it totally makes sense. It's don't kill the tool just because people may use it ineffectively or inappropriately. But speaking of deepfakes, we did get a question from the audience from McDaffie CH. Do you see a role for deep learning in look dev? And maybe Genevieve, do you want to answer that, and then we'll go to Ryan? Or
yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't have a huge amount of experience in that sort of technology to this date, but I think to be honest, I think all the technologies eventually sort of play a role in terms of like VFX, and I think there definitely would be a use for that probably at some point in the look dev process. I think probably right now it's probably not quite developed enough yet, but in terms of the look dev, it's more of what exactly sort of aspect of the look dev area are you referring to? Is it more of like, because I guess in VFX terms, look dev sort of also relates to just, the way a 3D character sort of reacts to lighting. But it also, look dev is, you can sort of describe developing a look of a shot or a character as look dev as well. In that sort of regards, I think, yes, it definitely could be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we've seen texture synthesis, that's hard to say, texture synthesis going on in SIGGRAPH papers and stuff for years, but now there's this opportunity to maybe use AI in order to do that in a different way, as you've seen some of those style transfer things going on from I think and then in terms of material material properties, I think that's a really interesting thing as well. Could you use that to take a picture of something and inherently pull the material properties from that and put it onto a 3D object?
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody else?
I don't know if you guys saw the paper out recently. I think Paul Dubavik was a co-author about relighting. Really fantastic work. It does use some machine learning on the back end, and I think it's gonna I think that's sort of like driven tools. There's also Digital Domain is doing some work with simulations and machine learning. So like Love and Monsters, I love all the like squishy simulation type effects that are going on in that film. It makes it really fun. And maybe if the machine learning might be able to reduce sim times or something like that. So I think we'll end up finding, or the tool makers, the digital content creator tool sets will end up implementing machine learning in interesting ways that make the use of tools more effective.
Yeah, and they might take some of the grunt work out of, you know, those simulations and things like that, and it might get it to the 80% mark, you know, straight off the bat, and then the artist kind of just polish that last 20% to get it where it needs to be.
Well, even for non-technical artists, you know, other people that have the story or the vision in their head, being able to use these tools of, you know, style GANs and, you know, even like NVIDIA's Project Canvas, you know, of being able to do this. And, you know, if you're look deving something, you know, can a non-technical artist, a director or a DP that, you know, isn't familiar with Unreal or Nuke or some of the other tools out there, where they can jump into these tools and go, hey, I have this reference photo. Can I feed it into this database and pull out all the color palette that I may want to use for translating to like a lighting TD, you know, or to an entire previous house that they may work with, and go, hey, I did this ahead of time. This is kind of where my idea is going. And they can feed that off to, you know, maybe more technical artists, or be able to get the vision out quicker. So then everybody that's collaborating on that project, that would be where I could see a good use of, you know, kind of AI and machine learning coming into play.
Okay. We have another question related to AI. I'm not sure I understand it, but it's from FX Node. And the question is, how can the AI decision-making be understood? And so I think maybe it's related to how do you make the decision about where to use AI, when to use AI, and in the visual effects process. Hopefully I've gotten that right. Do you guys have some thoughts? For, like on one level, AI, like normally once you've trained a model, you send it in and you get an output. And the manipulation of that output can sometimes be quite challenging. And it's almost like trying to animate on top of motion capture, right? Because you've got that dense data of here's the solution. Maybe maybe you have some thoughts and related to how do you just determine when to use AI, or how much you can put that in order to still leave some artistic control.
Jim said something earlier about trying out some different libraries and just getting unexpected results. And it's really fantastic when the AI or when the machine learning learns something incorrectly and gets it wrong, but has a really high confidence that it's right. And I think just like socially speaking, it's interesting how, you know, we're all products of our particular training, and how, you know, it's made me look at kind of what I know in the world a little differently than what. So I don't know if the question is how do you understand what the AI is doing right now. I think they're still simple enough. The networks, we use a BGG like network, which is basically compresses things down to this latent space, and then the latent space you can kind of operate like marionette strings. There's, you know, thousands of them, but you can kind of pull these strings, you know, with procedurally to create a new picture. But I think that they will eventually become more complex, that we won't understand what's going on in the middle, and we'll just have to trust, like we trust an artist, that this process is generating something that's, you know, the way we want it. So yeah, it's an interesting idea. How does that look in the future when the machine learning is so complex with so much memory, so many memory connections that it's beyond our comprehension of how it's generating a picture.
Too many strings to pull. Right. Yeah.
So I have a question for Ryan on it. Sorry, Genevieve.
Oh, I was going to just say, from a creative perspective, I mean, it might create something that you weren't expecting, but on a creative level, it might be something you're like, oh, actually, it gives you a new idea and a new direction to go down.
The happy accident.
Yeah.
I'm going to switch, because we don't have any other machine learning based questions. We had one early on that's a complete shift from that. So shake it off. Are globalization of VFX workforces and democratization of VFX mutually inclusive or exclusive? And maybe I know at least Genevieve has worked globally, so maybe you're the right person to answer that question initially.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly been an exciting thing over the course of my experience in the industry, and now certainly with COVID and sort of forcing people to work remotely has also opened up another door now to that sort of dimension of the workforce. For me, I started out in Melbourne, Australia, and at the time in Australia, there wasn't really many VFX options. There was one studio that I started out at Allura in Melbourne, which is now Method Studios. And beyond that, there was another studio, Rising Sun, in Adelaide, and then Animal Logic in Sydney. And kind of at the time, that was all my options. And for me, I kind of wanted to really broaden my skills and work at another studio. And at the time, in Vancouver, in Canada, the industry was really booming, and there was just lots and lots of studios opening up there. And I made the decision, I could move interstate within Australia, or I could sort of go to Canada and explore my options there. And both of them sort of involved me having to pack up and move somewhere else. So I decided to head over to Canada, where the options were really just booming at the time. And yeah, just over the growth of that, you've seen like all the major studios kind of opened up in Vancouver. And then also in Canada, in Montreal as well, all the studios sort of now opened up there, and the options for artists were just kind of endless. All the major studios were there. There was lots of smaller studios sort of growing as well at the time. So it took a lot of people over there.
Let me put a finer point on that, because I think, so one of the reasons, I think we're all aware, anybody that's watching this is aware, one of the reasons why there's been growth in some of these different markets is through digital production incentives. Right? Vancouver had a great one. Montreal has a great one. Australia now has a great one, which is why you've thankfully been able to come home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I met a lot of Australians along my way that was in the same position as me, but now we're kind of all back in Australia because it's just absolutely growing here now as well.
So I guess that maybe the question is that fine point of, are they democratization, meaning anybody can do it from anywhere, versus globalization, which a lot of the globalization has happened because of production incentives in specific locations. Do you think that those are mutually inclusive or exclusive?
I mean, I think they're probably, I think it definitely includes, like, it's making the market much smaller in terms of like the artist pool. It's accessible all over the world through the incentives and through remote, being able to work remotely from home. So I think it's kind of like it's opened up to everybody at the moment. And even going back to having the tools and the programs all available to everybody, people can sort of learn this stuff at home on the other side of the world, and then eventually work for a company on the opposite side of the world to where they are through all their learning of access to all these tools.
Yeah. Cool. What about you, gentlemen? Jim, I know you just went from the East Coast back to Los Angeles.
So for us at Dimension, it's interesting because we have European and North America studios. So when the kind of pandemic was in full force, nobody was in the studio. We were trying to figure out how can we keep working and fulfilling the work that we were doing that may have not needed to be on set and actually do physical production. And it was mostly either CG deliverables or certain platforms for AR and VR. And it's really been interesting to see even in the past 15 months, like how we've been able to, and others have been able to kind of pivot and either find the artists or the technologists we've needed to remotely. Obviously, there's some things that still need to be done in studio in person. I mean, like who's managing the farm, and what people are in studio versus.
How many gigabytes per second is a volumetric capture?
Oh, I mean, we're talking, we're talking gigabytes. We're minimum on our setup. We have 106 cameras. So based on the sensor size of that, it's like if you take a reference of a full volumetric capture versus a digital cinema capture, say through like a red camera, you're talking of 50 megabits on that single frame versus gigabytes on a single frame for volumetric capture. So yeah, data. I mean, I think that's a big thing we've all dealt with in terms of the accessibility to people and tools is looking at what kind of infrastructure we've had in place, globally, because I think all of us were at the mercy of our bandwidth providers globally. If you didn't have a great bandwidth at home, you can work remotely, or, if the artists that were remote didn't have the right tools, they didn't have updated GPUs, maybe their laptop or their desktop was a couple cycles older. So there's all these things that kind of ripple through this, kind of the democratization of this globally is like, what do people have access to and how do we get them to have, access to it? It's like, so if we're sending out, these kits to the artists that are remote, I think two things too. It's, the pandemic made everybody think differently about where they wanted to work. I think some of us got a little spoiled, past 15, 18 months of being able to be home with the family and still work. I've got 3 kids, so it's, it's a nice balancing act too of like, if we're doing Zoom calls and you have your VAD meetings, like we've got 3 kids running around in the background. Like there's a nice balance of like, how do you do all this stuff and still get work done?
Ryan, do you want to comment on globalization?
I mean, it's a huge topic. It's really one of those sort of sticky, wicked problems that doesn't have like a necessarily good answer. I think there's SIGGRAPH and VES are really great kind of organizations that are community minded and they help get information out and they're helping that democratization process. But then there are some, like, nobody wants to be a migrant worker and have to like go, move here because of this incentive and then move here because of this incentive. And so, yeah, I think it is great that hopefully that's sort of relaxing. And I think these places have built up, like Vancouver is a fantastic resource for talent right now because everybody did move there and there were a lot of incentives, and so they probably have a lot of benefits outside of the visual effects community because there's a lot more jobs there. So I mean, economics wise, I don't know what the right answer is for the globalization, but I do think that it's important to be mindful that we're not sort of like taking advantage of different parts of the world for different types of labor. And that we're trying to keep the playing field as even as possible, even within the differences between different locations. But yeah, it's a sticky problem.
Yeah. So we don't have other questions from the audience. Please feel free to ask a question if you're watching. We're answering them all. I guess one thing related to that is. We talked about tools and democratization of as these tools become more and more available. Jim, you even talked about how some of the tools that you're using for virtual production, courtesy of Epic or others, are provided for free to people to use, right? In order to increase their use and promote their use. And as you've seen that, and as you've seen that growth, you've also seen a lot of tool development research that had been done in the studios, in the post-production studios themselves, migrating over to those tools manufacturers because they're making a tool for, thousands, tens of thousands of customers instead of, 1,000 in an internal studio. How do you think that's affecting? And if you look forward, in the future, is that democratization? Is that going to increase democratization because now those tools are available to everybody at all points in time, or is it? Sometimes democratization, you think about the net neutrality laws, right? And so there's a democratization of making sure that there's a level playing field, just like what Ryan was saying, of the barrier to entry. Like, hey, man, I'm not Epic. If I wanted to make a tool set for other people to use, they have, got Fortnite money. They're doing amazing things for the industry, but I can't compete. Much like I'm not trying to write a search engine at this point in time. So have you guys thought about that as you develop tools internally, or have you thought about selling your wares, your products or services to other people?
Yeah, I think a really good example of that is, my buddy Matt Workman. He's been building his tool set off of the basis of Unreal, and he has a tool called Cine Tracer. So even though it's built off of the engine, he's building some specific tools for for filmmakers and storytellers to be able to previs and audition, blocking out scenes and trying different workflows out. And I think if Epic was closed down, or if it was more of a walled garden, we wouldn't see as many, I think, great external tool sets on the marketplace, and other companies, RE and other manufacturers, lighting companies, they make tool sets that augment what are available directly from let's say Epic. Unity has its marketplace, the Turbo Squid, art people sell their wares on ArtStation, and it can be something as simple as like a nuke gizmo or a macro. So I think we've been seeing a lot of these either individual artists that have been working, understand, and they go, I've been using this one macro in Nuke for years, and I know other artists have always been asking me for it and all that. And sometimes they just set up a Gumroad account, and they just put that tool out there, and they say, hey, like Radiohead, pay me what you think this tool is worth.
So I guess kind of like how AAA games haven't killed independent game manufacturing. In fact, like the Steam marketplace has even improved that, and just the desire for more of that content is out there. You think it's great. Maybe last comments from where we should be wrapping up. Last comments from anybody, either about that topic or about the democratization of visual effects in general.
I don't want to speak right after I spoke, so I'll let Genevieve or Ryan speak first.
No,
I'll jump in just to. Oh, go ahead, Genevieve.
No, you go for it. Go for it.
Just on the footnote of that, I think accessibility does increase demand, and then the sort of other idea about making things available. There was at the beginning of our project, there was a paper that came out. It was called "Video in Painting," and before I could implement it myself, Adobe had it in their product, in one of their products. So yeah, it's pretty amazing just the breakneck speed of technology getting out to people to be able to use.
And I think that increases efficiency as well. Artists, if they move from different studios, they know they can still have access to the same tools, which increases efficiency, or they don't have to learn a new tool or sort of get that company to create a tool that they had previously used that was quite efficient at another studio.
Yeah. Well, I guess it kind of goes full circle to the most important ingredient in all of this is the people and the talent. Right?
Yeah.
And speaking of talented people, thank you all. Is that good? That was really good transition. Thank you all.
Nice segue.
Being on this panel. And thank you, SIGGRAPH, again for giving us this opportunity.